Hey, Xomniverse. Thank you for the response. Let me start by talking about abstract thought. That it's our tool in trade. I mean, as anarchists, we're constantly trying to think outside the box and imagine new and different ways to organize society. Undermining illegitimate forms of authority and oppression. So no need to preach to the choir on that. But for the purposes of this discussion between market anarchists and libertarian socialists, I think that we are getting lost in the abstractions, deriving conclusions based on those abstractions, and creating the false illusion of differences where they may or may not lie. And I think we could further the dialogue by focusing on real-world examples and then you can abstract from those once we really uncover the fundamental disagreements. Then I think you can draw your abstractions. But I think we're putting the cart before the horse in that we're drawing our abstractions first. And actually in your video you do this a number of times, and I'll show you why. So the reason I'm talking about that, is only for the purposes of this discussion. For instance, you say that you could show me how the free market would increase the amount of food. But that's not the problem. The problem isn't the amount of food. Like, we don't have enough. We have too much food. It's going to waste. Half of all the food in the U.S. is going to waste. Half. 30 to 40% in the U.K. I mean, you extrapolate this throughout Europe and in the industrialized world. This is an incredible amount of waste. We're not talking a couple of apples falling off the truck. We are talking about just immeasurable waste. Let me just give you some real-world examples here. Official surveys indicate that every year more than 350 billion pounds of edible food is available for human consumption in the United States. Of that total, nearly 100 billion pounds, including fresh vegetables, fruits, milk, and grain products, are lost to waste by retailers, restaurants, and consumers. By contrast, the amount of food required to meet the needs of the hungry, just in the United States, is only 4 billion pounds. So just a fraction of the waste here in this country. Everybody can have nice full bellies. It's not that we need the free market to grow more food. We need the free market to get the food to the people who need it. And that's the problem. So, and again, in your example, the carrot example. Your example, you abstract this idea that you grow these carrots, and you sell them all. And then I come along and I say, hey, Xomniverse, give some of those carrots to the poor people. And you're like, dude, I'm selling all my carrots. You want me to give up my carrots for nothing? That's not what I'm asking you. And that's the problem with your abstraction is you have this idea that you're selling all your carrots. You're really not. In the real world, they're not being all sold. A lot of them are dying on the vine, rotting on the vine. A lot more of them are rotting on store shelves and getting thrown into dumpsters. I mean, like I said, this is just a huge amount of waste. So I'm not asking you to do anything. And I'll just quote Puppy Hate, because I thought he left such a insightful quote or a comment on your page. What he said, and I quote, "If somebody needs food, you don't have a positive obligation to feed them. You just have a negative obligation to refrain from interfering while they get food." That's it. That's all we're talking about. As long as food exists, then food is not a positive right. It's a negative right, since nobody, other than the person who needs food, needs to take any action. Same thing with shelter. And then he says not so much with healthcare. That's what I'm talking about. I think my computer's slowing down, but okay. And that's where you act like one person's need is a moral claim on another human. No, this food's already being grown. It's not like we're asking, hey, to the farmers of the world, could you grow some more food? That would be that claim you're talking about. the food's already being grown. It's just being thrown out. You know, one, if you know, if you want to be sick about it, you can just have them grow less food. But they're already growing the food. Why, you know, let's get it to the people who need it. So, and then, of course, you brought up altruism. I'm not talking about altruism. I'm not an altruist. I don't think, you know, we should live for the needs of other people. But I think it's a mistake to not consider the needs of others, because, you know, as the Rage Against the Machine lyric goes, hungry people don't stay hungry for long. If you're in your house eating a fat supper every night, and your next door neighbor is living in a tent and not eating, you may have problems on your hands. And to bring this to the real world, we know that these things cause global unrest, civil unrest. They cause wars. They end up in acts of terrorism by hungry, frustrated people. Moreover, the waste that I'm talking about has externalities that are not factored into the cost, such as global warming. A lot of this wasted food goes into dumps, and it releases methane gas, which is much more, you know, problematic than carbon dioxide. You know, and as far as increasing global warming. It wastes our natural resources, our water, our topsoil, our arable land, and then there's all the socio-political repercussions. You know, the unrest. You know, hungry when people are starving. You know, it's not some abstraction. I mean, they're gonna do what they can to get food. That might mean slitting your throat. You know, it might mean bombing a building to say, hey, fuck you. It leads to a lot of different things. It's not an abstraction. These people will do what they can. It's in our best interest to not feed them. You know, and another thing I haven't talked about, well, I don't know if I'll have time, but, you know, I've talked about dumping of food, which is done to raise the commodity prices on certain things. But there's also the other dumping, food dumping, which, you know, large agribusiness, which is heavily subsidized by the state, heavily. If you had to pay like a market price for beef, it'd be $50, $60 a pound if you took away the subsidies for water and land and all the other subsidies that farmers get in this country. They take these heavily subsidized products, they dump them in the third world. What's it do? It puts those indigenous farmers, they can't compete. They're out of business. Where do they go? They go into the city, and they, you know, in Central and America and South America and Mexico, they end up migrating north to our cities, looking for work. There are real world repercussions to all of this. And it's not just an abstraction, 9 million people dying. It means something. You know, it affects the environment. It affects our living standard here in this country. And so, not only is it important to talk about, but I think as a matter of finding common ground and coming to some kind of consensus of what our common ground is and what our differences are, I think it's important. So, again, I'm not talking about altruism. I think it's just common sense that, you know, you know, if you got a hungry dog in your house, you don't feed him and he bites you, well, you know, that's just stupidity. You're not being altruistic in feeding that dog. It's in your self-interest. So maybe understanding where our self-interest lies, and what the real repercussions are for all this waste. So hopefully I've made some sense and I've rambled a bit, but thanks again, Xomniverse, and I hope to hear back from you. Peace.